So sorry about the delay there. I ended up having to update my broadcasting key. So it should be broadcasting now. We'll find out later. Anyways, we are talking about the evolution of ideas. It's interesting to consider ideas as behavior vectors. So an idea will determine how you behave in a specific situation, right? Oh, I didn't really want this done yet, but anyways, it's already there. I was going to use a moral foundation theory, and I'll talk about that in a bit here. But anyways, like I said, as usual, having technical difficulties. I'll get it down, though. I'm confident that I'll figure out what the hell I'm doing. But if we think of ideas as vectors in behavior, they determine how we will behave in a given situation. Beliefs, look at how beliefs change how we behave. If someone tells you that your mother or father was in a car accident, I mean, how you behave, whether it's true or not, your belief that that is true determines your behavior to a large degree. So our behaviors are focused on ideas that we have in our heads, and those ideas evolve. Now, and of course those are we believe things to be true or not true, or they may be true, so we give them credibility. But learning how to deal with things as if they might not be true isn't easy to do, meaning having two ideas, two possible things being true, right? And you may or may not ever know whether one or the other is true. We like certainty, so we act under the guise of certainty. Now, recently I was starting to listen to the book, a recommendation by Michael Shermer in the book title, I'll just tell you that, and then if I never come back to it, at least I will have made mention to it, because one of the things I did like about the book right away was that it was trying to show how just a simple action, the cognitive dissonance that we automatically try to do in supporting an idea, our behavior, if our behavior indicates a certain belief, we then try to codify that belief in some way, and things were wrong, mistakes were made, but not by me. Is the title of the book. And it's looking at cognitive dissonance and how we, as a normal behavior, if we make a decision, how we will then codify that in some way as being the right decision. And in fact, and I thought that with the analogy I thought was particularly good was we always think of the analogy of he who lives in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. He who almost lived in a glass house is the first one to start throwing stones, meaning the closer you are to making that decision and then not making the decision means that you are more diametrically opposed. I mean, who hasn't run into a person that has stopped smoking and is really against smokers? That sort of that self-righteous, smoking's bad, I managed to stop smoking, you can stop smoking too. Now these are moral ideas that we have. And I would submit that ideas are not independent of our moral thinking. And here we have the moral foundation theory, and this is a theory proposed by Jonathan Haidt. Now I say ideas, evolutionary ideas. Now the foundation of ideas and thinking in general comes down to these type of moral precepts that we have, that we evolved over time to help us live as a civilized society. Caring, fairness, loyalty, authority, respect, sanctity, and purity. Okay, so these are moral foundations, but these foundations are attached to all the words that we used in some way. We can root that word back to fairness, proportionality in terms of mathematics. It's a study of fairness, if you will, based on rules. Are these rules fair? Are these rules proportional? Are these rules, these beliefs real? Now, it's kind of hard to do as a practical matter sometimes, but what I like to do is think about the emotions of something that I'm saying at a specific point in time. Am I appealing to caring? Am I appealing to fairness? Am I appealing to authority? Where am I orientated in the conversation that I'm having with myself or with someone else or right now? And I look at the behavior that I'm trying to exhibit and try to get back in return. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? And you'll find is that we're trying to accomplish one of these moral attributes. We're either trying to demonstrate it or we're trying to encourage others to demonstrate it. And that's the formation, that's the evolution of our ideas. I mean, we're evolving within this framework of these moral attributes. Now, values first ethics isn't, in many ways, it's on top of this moral foundation theory. I didn't design it with the intent of saying these things aren't true, but it does question any one of these moral assumptions, saying there may be contradictions, there may be cognitive dissonance between what you think you're trying to accomplish and what you're actually accomplishing. And that's where we have to be really careful to actually measure and determine what we're actually accomplishing. Because if we're not willing to measure it, we're not willing to change it. And that is sort of a basic, if you can't measure it or you're unwilling to measure it, why would you think you'd even be willing to change it? So in what way are you measuring your behavior against other people, and what kind of effect do you want it to have? Now, my personal pet peeve with conversations on the internet are they tend to be divisive. This is a bad person because they did X. A behavior is interesting, but I do want to understand why someone behaves in the way they do. What are their expectations of accomplishment? What do they want to accomplish with that specific behavior? What model of the world are they working under? What assumptions do they have? Now, that's one aspect, but what values do they have? Because oftentimes people will say they value one thing, but the behavior indicates they're valuing something else. Now, the hierarchy of values determines our ideas. Those are the ideas we attract. Those are ideas we value something, so we want to reinforce our values. The problem that I have with some of this is that I can see there's a lot of different avenues that I could take in terms of describing people's personal values. But if you want to use a term like war, for example, to describe we're in a cultural war, the problem is you end up encouraging a type of winner-take-all mentality. And I don't think that's a good avenue to take. Not encouraging cooperation, you're encouraging divisiveness. So that's why I don't like the idea of culture war, the idea of it's war of ideas. It's getting to a point that we can collaborate on ideas. I prefer the marketplace of free ideas, the marketplace of ideas, because it says that we're trying to facilitate better ideas. We're trying to create where we can come up with good ideas. And this is a problem we have with debate. Now, if some people may have not noticed, but some people may have, people like Sam Harris and David Rubin of the Rubin Report really prefer the conversational format. Joe Rogan would be another example of someone who prefers a conversational format. Now, in general, they don't have extremely divisive people on their shows that have extremely different opinions. Now, Dave Rubin, in some respects, is more of an exception in that he is soliciting really alternative viewpoints and is trying to find common ground in terms of building a society that we all want to live in, not just some of us, but all of us. So be careful with the ideas that you back for divisive reasons. And the foundation of ideas are rapidly changing very quickly in this ecosystem that we have created. Whether you call it YouTube, whether you call it social media, the ability to communicate globally changes how we interact with people. And it is a fundamental difference than we've never had in the civilization. So you can't just say things are the way they've always been, because we've kind of changed the rules substantially. We have the capacity to create a new kind of framework in terms of getting ideas out there more rapidly. And so right now you will see, and it will happen as it always generally does, is you have sort of a crystallization of people that will represent the new structure in the new media. And of course you have a lot of resistance to this new configuration of ideas and how we do this. But one of the things we want to try to do, in my opinion, is we want to try to create the idea that create a real marketplace of ideas where real ideas can get out there. So debate it's more divisive, it's more warlike. Whereas conversation is more, well, what ideas do we like and what do we want to dispense with? What's working and what's not working? And why is it not working? What are the consequences? Now, when we look at modern feminism or third wave feminism, however you might want to call it, social justice warriors, the ideas are poorly formulated. The foundational ideas are very poorly formulated. Patriarchy theory isn't tenable. It doesn't really describe society in any reasonable way. It looks at it as a very narrowly focused hierarchical system, which it doesn't really describe the interplay between men and women and in society. So it's founded on some very poor ideas. And then coming up with a divisive idea like rape culture doesn't really describe relationships between men and women. And it victimizes women, that kind of thinking. It terrorizes women and uses the fear-mongering that is a staple of news media. You know, news media is primarily focused on fear. You know, it only tells us the terrible things. If it bleeds, it leads. And because we have to be focused, because we're survival machines, we are primarily focused on those ideas that pose danger to us. We're not really interested in ideas that will help us grow, will help us flourish. Now, we do eventually if we feel safe, and then we start moving to those ideas. So by making women feel afraid, by making minorities feel afraid, by making them feel fresh, they can't flourish. So ideas that tell them they're victims, ideas that tells them they can't succeed, are basically oppressing them with the auspices that they're trying to help. Now, I say this based on what I see as psychological principles that aren't really much in disagreement. You know, in terms of how you help someone, self-help books would agree with me down the road. I mean, however you want to say that. But this isn't much in debate. I mean, how you help someone self-actualize themselves isn't oppressing them. It's telling them all the things, all the capabilities they have in life. So we're dealing with a system of information, an architecture of information that was very narrowly focused. It was in the hands of the few. And now the ideas are flowing more freely than they ever have in the history of the world. And we're seeing where things go. At the individual level, we need to be looking at how our ideas are changing and maybe make place markers and saying, okay, now I thought this, but this is changing in this particular way. Why is it changing? Or why do I feel it's changing? And one of the interesting memes in memeology, if we will, if that's a word yet, to realize that complex systems, really haven't. I didn't get into a question that happened, and it was should have done it at the beginning of the video, but science hasn't. The idea that was presented was that we need a breakthrough in social science for it to be recognized as real science. And I said, it's not that we haven't had breakthroughs in social science, it's that we haven't recognized those breakthroughs in the same way that we recognize the breakthroughs of Einstein. It's not as clear. Evolution is a major breakthrough in social science. We haven't recognized it as a social science breakthrough. That everything comes back and gets wrapped into that in a way, because everything is an extension of a complex system. So all systems, once you have an anti-fragile system, you then are building other anti-fragile systems on top of those existing ones. Now we can build artificial systems that are fragile, such as dams, bridges, roads. These are physical systems, and they don't have any anti-fragile characteristics to them, but then you can build artificial intelligence that starts to exhibit some of these anti-fragile characteristics. Governments have anti-fragile stuff in them because the people in those systems are people, and they will exhibit anti-fragile behavior. And what I mean by this is you will see institutions self-protect if they get attacked in terms of funding, in terms of influence. They will territorialize. They'll say, well, this is a part of my territory. And you see it in governments, you see it in any kind of institutionalized structure, bureaucracy. So we know there's still anti-fragile, but the anti-fragile characteristics come from the people in the system, not from the system itself per se. It just allows that human characteristic to flourish. So the thing I was thinking about with this particular idea was that we need to grow, or we want to grow a system that encourages free exchange of ideas and recognize that we're not going to come up with the perfect solution, and that we can change our ideas if we realize that particular idea is not working. But you need measures, and you need to decide whether or not you want that to be a part of your system. So the freedom of speech is a method by which to get at ideas without restricting someone's access to saying it in a way they feel is most descriptive of what their idea is. And the criticism of that idea is to make sure it's as robust as possible. So We criticize because we want any idea to be as robust as it can possibly be. Now, this is the idealized version of what we envision when we think of freedom of speech. Now, the value of this value that I'm outlining isn't necessarily being achieved by people being allowed to say anything they want. The question would be, what's the best way to control constructive dialogue? Is it by suppressing speech, or is it by simply encouraging positive, constructive speech? Now, that would be the debate between censorship and non-censorship. Now, you can be on any part of that debate as you want, but in some sense, we have the bandwidth to have long, drawn-out conversations. And then we can refine those conversations over a period of time and a period of conversations. We're not restricted to a single event once a year. We can think about it, converse with a few people that may have similar ideas, and then see where we get and see where the problems actually lie, where we think there might be problems, and then maybe even come up with a means by which to test whether the ideas make sense. Now, there are a lot of psychological principles that we really haven't put into practice. We haven't really formalized them. And one thing, if you do watch Gad Saad, he's trying to formalize them in terms of how you can use these ideas in an everyday kind of thing. And he tries to make very palatable his ideas. And when you think of ideas, you have to make an idea digestible. If you can't digest the idea, then it's not going to be able to be used. If I can't convince you that it's reasonable and it fits into your architecture, whatever your mental architecture is, if I can convince you that it works, then you're not going to adopt that particular idea. So I have to create ideas that are acquirable. So now I was thinking about it, and I was going to look it up, but I didn't before I did this, right, with supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Okay, that word is virtually never used except in reference to the movie Mary Poppins. Now, if I'm wrong about that, let me know, but I don't think I am. So the word survives because a rhythmic song was created to incorporate this incredibly long word. But that word itself is very fragile, and it's going to break down and will hardly ever be used. And it's not tenable for evolution. It's not going to go into the future. So long ideas and complex ideas tend to break down and get misconstrued in a large variety of ways. But then we have simple ideas that then start formulating and use constantly. Now, one of the ideas that I was thinking about in this regard was the idea of a straw man. And the visuals, I sometimes will think in terms of the visuals of a particular idea. And the nice thing about the straw man is it has a very functional illustration in the scarecrow. The scarecrow is used to scare away crows. Now, that's a visual. I can tell you a story about the idea. So when you use a straw man, you're coming up with an argument that scares away in this case, scares away argument. Now, I'm thinking about this in terms of if you make a straw man of someone else's argument, and it becomes kind of, there's a little bit of a cognitive dissident for me right now for that particular word, but that's where the origins of that particular idea comes from. And to scare away other people's arguments from that field, if you will. The other idea that I was, now I've forgotten, and I didn't do a good job of writing down notes. I started to, but then I got sidetracked on some of these other avenues. This is a problem about doing live shows, right? But anyways, hear me hear me out on this last one. I want to talk about how we can convolute an idea, in terms of the famous OK symbol. When imagine before Google, it's hard, I know, but if you're looking at a word, word usage, OK was like the number one word that was universalized. In fact, Coca-Cola used OK for OK Cola, right? Because they were like, well, Coke is like one of the most popular, but OK is even more popular. Why don't we just have OK Cola? I don't know where they got the idea from, but part of it was this idea that, well, OK is like the universal symbol of all times, right? It's like up there. Why not just capitalize on that and have OK Cola? No one has an OK Cola. Anyways, that went over like a lead balloon. So it was funny when 4chan, I guess, is the one that came up and decided they were going to make this a white supremacist symbol. And what's interesting about that, and it's important to recognize, is this is about hacking cognitive concepts, right? People have a preconceived notion about something, and if they sell it in a specific way, there are those that will pick it up and believe it, right? They're gullible, they're susceptible, they won't critique something that seems plausible. I mean, it actually seems plausible. I mean, it was brilliant in its simplicity, and people can convolute an idea because it's easy to do, and we're susceptible to that. But being aware it's done is a good thing. I mean, this is an example of how susceptible we are to being gamed. And this information, we have so much information that we have to filter it. We have to realize we're getting more negative information because we tend to gravitate towards negative information because of survival instincts. So that's the world we live in. So we have to make a conscious effort to realize, well, that's not really what's going on, and we need to be careful of the diet of information that we get. And we need to be able to engage in information of ideas. So that's more important than vilifying somebody or agreeing with someone. Are you digesting the information that you're being given, or are you throwing it away? Are you actually truly processing what they're saying, or are you just simply labeling it and tossing it out? And so those are the ideas that we're dealing with now. And think about caring, fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity, and how are you feeling about what someone is saying? Where do you think that category in you is? What emotions are the words that they're telling you, instilling in you? Now, disgust is under sanctity and purity, and disgust is a very, very powerful emotion. And a lot of times people try to trigger disgust. That's when they use the Nazism. That's when they use, racism. They try to trigger disgust because it's disgusting. And you'll see people, Ben Affleck being a classic example. He has that disgusting face, the disgust response he has to racism. That's racist. And that's a sanctity response. And people use that to get that emotional reaction. And what do you do with things that are disgusting? What do you do with garbage? You throw it out. And so that's the sanctity response to things that make you feel disgusted. Now, in the future, I'm still working on trying to get this more concise. So it's a work in progress. I will try to keep it short and sweet. I am listening to these after I do them. Where can I strengthen? Where can I weaken? And I did say some things in the other one that I would probably not want to say in the future. don't ever think if I say something really kind of divisive or direct, it's probably not exactly what I wanted to say. And so I'll go back and listen to this and decide, well, how could I have been more prepared? Now, so I'll do another one tomorrow, and I haven't really decided what the topic is, but I'll probably give a starter to it soon, and I'll think about it. But remember, it's you want this to be a conversation, and if you ever have a comment, please comment. But if you don't have a comment, you're not required to comment. Anyways, thanks for listening. This is the second Catalyzer show. I will do one more Catalyzer show tomorrow, and then I think I'll do a Catalyzer show on Thursday, and then one on Friday. I think I can do one. And I'm going to try 5 days a week, but and probably around the same time. If you have a better time, please let me know. Anyways, thanks for watching. I will try to do better next time. This is an evolutionary process. Thanks for watching.